Today we're going deep into a case that I think uh, just captivated the country. The disappearance and murder of Chandra Levy. Now, this isn't just another true crime story. This is about ambition and political intrigue and a really agonizing search for the truth that continues even today.
And it's one of those cases that kind of, really shows how a missing persons report can become like this national obsession fueled by, the alleged involvement of a really high-profile congressman.
Yeah. So for those who maybe aren't as familiar with the case, Chandra Levy was a 24-year-old grad student from California. And she was in Washington, D.C., interning for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which was a pretty promising step towards a career that she'd been working towards for years.
I mean, she had already completed internships for both the mayor of Los Angeles and the governor of California, so you can really see she was dedicated to public service. This wasn't someone who would just disappear.
And yet, on May 1st, 2001, she vanished, seemingly into thin air. I mean, she was last seen leaving her DuPont Circle apartment, supposedly packing to go back to California for graduation. But then her suitcases were found untouched, and she never left.
Yeah, and one of the things that always gets me about this case is the internet search history on Chandra's computer. The night before she disappeared, she looked up Rock Creek Park, even downloaded a map of the area.
It's really creepy, especially knowing that Rock Creek Park would later become the setting for a very grim discovery.
For sure. But before we get into all of that, we have to talk about the other big thing that pushed this case into the spotlight. Congressman Gary Condit. He represented Chandra's home district in California, and he was very reluctant to talk to investigators at first.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. And his denials of any relationship with Chandra really only made the media focus more intense. Then the fact that they were having an affair came out, and it just fueled all those theories.
Right. And Condit, while never officially a suspect, all the media attention surrounding the case definitely destroyed his career and his reputation. He lost his re-election bid in 2002, a pretty clear sign of how the public felt.
Definitely. But even while the media was all over Condit, the investigation into Chandra's disappearance continued. And for over a year, it was a total mystery.
Until May 2002, when a man walking his dog made a horrifying discovery in Rock Creek Park: skeletal remains. They were later identified as Chandra Levy's. This was a huge turning point, but also really frustrating.
Because that area had already been searched. The fact that they missed her remains raises some serious questions about how thorough those first searches were.
Absolutely, and to add to that, the decomposition made it impossible to know exactly how she died. So it was officially ruled a homicide, but with no clear forensic evidence, investigators were stuck.
So we knew she was murdered, but who did it? That question went unanswered for a long time. It wasn't until 2009, almost 8 years after Chandra vanished, that a suspect finally emerged.
Ingmar Guandique, an undocumented immigrant from El Salvador, was arrested and charged with Chandra's murder. And this arrest was largely because he had already pleaded guilty to assaulting 2 other women in Rock Creek Park around the same time that Chandra disappeared.
Yeah, so that established a possible pattern, but the prosecution's case was still pretty circumstantial. There was no DNA, fingerprints, nothing at the crime scene that directly connected him.
And that lack of physical evidence meant they had to rely heavily on the testimony of a fellow inmate, Armando Morales. And, well, that reliance on inmate testimony, it became a big problem for the trial.
Morales claimed that while they were in prison together, Guandique actually confessed to him, describing how he attacked Chandra in the park and left her there.
Right, and this is where things get a bit tricky. Inmate testimony, it can be a huge help in a case, but it's not always reliable.
Exactly. I mean, Morales was a convicted felon, and he had a history of working with law enforcement to get lighter sentences. So people were skeptical, wondering if he was just trying to help himself or if he really wanted justice for Chandra.
Yeah, there are definitely questions about his motives.
But despite all that, the lack of physical evidence and the questions about Morales, the jury found Guandique guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. And it seemed like maybe, finally, Chandra's family could get some closure. But, well, as we know, it didn't really end there.
It didn't, not at all.
Because just as it seemed settled, Guandique's lawyers found something. Information suggesting that Morales had lied about being an informant.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, a prosecutor in California confirmed that Morales had worked with law enforcement before, which totally contradicted what he said under oath at Guandique's trial.
So that really threw the whole case into question.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, everything was riding on Morales' testimony, and now suddenly that foundation was gone. The defense argued that Morales had made up the whole confession to get a shorter sentence for himself. making him, an unreliable witness.
I see.
And so, because of that, Guandique got a new trial. But before that could even start, another huge thing happened. Chandra's mother got a Facebook message from this woman, Babs Proler, who said she had a secret recording.
Hold on, a secret recording?
Yes, and Proler said this recording had Morales admitting he made up the whole confession about Guandique. I mean, talk about a twist. It could have completely blown the case apart.
Wow, so what happened?
Well, the prosecutors had to look into it, right? They had to be sure they were pursuing justice fairly. And when they listened to the recording, it was, well, pretty damning. They couldn't ignore it. With the possibility that their key witness had lied under oath, they had to drop the charges against Guandique.
So where did that leave things?
Guandique was released and deported back to El Salvador. It's a pretty amazing turn of events, and it left everyone wondering if Chandra's real killer would ever be found.
That's incredible. But even though Guandique was cleared, it doesn't necessarily mean he was innocent, right? Just because they didn't have enough to convict him, it doesn't completely rule him out.
So, that's where we are now. This case, after all these twists and turns, is still unsolved. And it really shows just how complicated the justice system can be and how much these unanswered questions affect real people.
Yeah, we've seen how media attention can really change the direction of an investigation. How relying on someone's word in prison is, well, risky. And how time passing makes finding the truth even harder.
And with Guandique gone and no new suspects, this is officially a cold case now. Does that mean it's impossible to find justice for Chandra? Like, what can investigators even do at this point?
Well, cold cases definitely have unique challenges. Evidence can get messed up, memories fade, people are harder to find. But it's not always impossible to solve them.
So there are things they could still try, like new technologies or forensics that weren't around back then.
Oh yeah, totally. Like DNA analysis has changed a lot. Even tiny bits of DNA that they couldn't use before can now give them crucial information. And they could also look at the old evidence again, use new techniques to see if there's something they missed.
So you're saying there's still a chance, even now, that maybe Chandra Levy could get justice?
It's a long shot, but there's always a chance. Sometimes it's just one small detail, looking at things a new way, or someone finally coming forward that can make the difference.
It just makes you think, right? Behind all the headlines and court stuff, there's a real person. A young woman who is just starting her life. And her family deserves answers.
Exactly, and that's why cold cases are so important. It's about finding the truth and holding someone accountable, not just for Chandra, but for her family who have had to deal with this awful loss and not knowing what happened.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Chandra Levy case, I just feel uneasy, all those twists and turns, and still no real ending. So many unanswered questions, like what would it take to start this investigation again? Is there something we missed? A detail that needs another look? Or maybe someone out there knows the truth and just needs to come forward. Maybe someday those answers will come out and Chandra Levy will finally get the justice she deserves.